Good morning, Daily Devotion watchers. Welcome. It's about 10:30. Posting a little bit late today, but here we are. I'm glad to have you with me. So today we're going to work with the parable of the talents from Matthew chapter 25. And I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to talk about a few things throughout these next 4 days. Just listen. For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You've been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance, but from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 25:14 through 30. So this parable is very rich and very dynamic, I think. And what I wanted to talk about today was, just as we get started into this week, are the 3 slaves or servants in the text. The word for them is actually slaves. Calls his slaves. And I wanted to just think a little bit about, I guess, who they are or how they interact with the world. I mean, he calls these 3 people to him, these 3 slaves, and he entrusts them with his property. And throughout the whole parable, there's this clear connection to the property, or the treasure is actually what the literal word is. I'll talk about that more later on in the week. He entrusts his treasure to them, and then he goes away on a journey. And throughout the whole parable, if you read it closely, there's a clear connection that the slaves or servants are his, the treasure's his, and the returns on the treasure, however they invest it, are his. And then you get to the third guy, the guy that gets 1. And there's this interesting piece of that story where he says, I know that you are a harsh man, or a hard man, and you reap where you don't sow, and you gather where you don't scatter. So here, have what's yours. And then he gets called wicked or evil and lazy. And that's always bothered me, because he's living in fear, and that doesn't really connect with what I know of God, who enters into our fear and wants to give us peace and grace in the midst of it. And so that's always bothered me. And as I was exploring the parable this morning and thinking about what's the third slave afraid of, I'll read that part again. Then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward and said, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid. And they went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. What's he afraid of? I've been thinking about that all morning because I guess I don't know what because if he was afraid, he would have done exactly what Jesus says. If you were afraid that you were going to lose my money or waste my money, you would have done something really safe and secure like putting it in the bank. But you didn't do that. It's almost like Jesus is, or God's calling this man in his excuse because he's afraid. I think he says, I know who you are, God. You're a harsh man. You take credit where you don't do any work. And so you've given me this stuff, and at the end of the day, I'm going to work really hard for it, and I'm just going to have to give it back to you. You're going to take credit for my work. You're going to take the returns, and I'm just going to be a servant again. I'm not going to have anything that's mine. And it kind of woke me up to think about how I view God, how I view life. This text is sometimes used as a stewardship text. When we talk about whatever, it's all God's, give what you have to God's, but I think we forget and don't ever take that far enough. This guy's afraid that he's going to take this money and go off and do whatever work he does with it, and at the end of the day, he's not going to get any credit for it. At the end of the day, he's not going to get to keep any of it. At the end of the day, it's just going to be God's, and he's going to not be able to do what he wants and be who he wants to be. And I think that's a really interesting way, and maybe painful way, but ultimately a joyful and freeing way to look at the world. Because so many times I think that we think that God or the church exists to serve us. And I don't think that that's true based on this parable. This parable doesn't break things down in that way. It breaks things down and says, listen, I'm God and you're mine, and I love you, and I trust you, and I value you, and I want you to take part in this whole dynamic of being in the world and being a creative force in the world. You're going to find joy in that. If you're going to think that this is about you and holding on to you and having just your needs met and just your desires met and just whatever you're about taking care of, that's kind of a fearful place to be, because you know in your heart that that's not how God works. That this is all God's, but that God is the only one that can actually hold on to all of this. That's our life and the world, and move it towards a good, loving end. You can't, because we say we're broken. People in the world can't, because the world works from a sinful attitude. And then it puts us down and reorients our life the right way to God, where these other two slaves heard that they were honored and trusted, and they immediately went out and lived into that and engaged the world. This other guy was afraid that it wasn't going to be about him, and therefore he's bound. Right? He's weeping and gnashing of teeth in darkness because he can't see himself as God sees him, and thus he gets termed wicked and lazy for not embracing that. And I think it's just a spiritual wake-up call for us, but also a spiritual blessing. You belong to God. God has your life in God's hands through Jesus Christ, and is holding you in the midst of all of this, and is calling us to engage the world. And in that circle, in that interconnectedness, we not only meet other people's needs, but we have our needs met and can live in a more free way, versus being bound like this guy to try to cling to stuff so we can have it and make it ours, and not lose it. It will never belong to us, and that's liberating and joyful ultimately, because then all your life is a gift. All your service is a gift. All the blessings you receive is a gift, and you'll be able to see that in hard times we're sustained as a gift, versus somehow getting punished or something like that. So what's the man afraid of? I think he's afraid that he's not going to get anything that he works for. And I don't think that's true. God's given you everything and will continue to love you and care for you until eternal life comes in this world. In the meantime, we belong to God and get to live like that and find our joy. I hope you have a blessed day. And I hope that you can realize that God trusts you and loves you and wants to send you out in the world to be free. Have a blessed day.